Hey everyone, and welcome to the Irenic Ref podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Gross. The word Irenic means aimed at or aiming towards peace, and my goal with this podcast is to try to create a bridge between coaches and officials by showing the humanity of each other in a more robust way, which isn't necessarily achievable in the minimal interactions a coach and official may experience during a game. With all that said, let's get to it. Today's guest is going into his 8th year as a high school basketball coach and has been coaching at one school during his entire duration. During his 7 years as a head coach, he has really built his program from the ground up. He has 86 total wins in his career, and 71 of those wins coming in the past 4 years, an average of nearly 18 wins. He was the 2024 South Dakota Girls Basketball Coach of the Year, and his teams were 2024 Conference champions, as well as the 2024 South Dakota Class B Girls State Champions. He most recently welcomed his first child into the world, Harrison, on June 5th, and during this recording, that's not much more than a few weeks out. And he's also, as I mentioned, the head coach and the girls' head coach for the Centerville Tornadoes. Please help me welcome Tucker Tornberg. Tucker, thanks for coming on to the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Andrew. I'm excited about this, and I'm glad that you're doing this.
Yeah, I enjoy having all these conversations, whether it's the coaches or the officials. I mean, you can ask my wife after I get done. I'm kind of jacked up and just ready for basketball season to roll around. But I do want to touch on something really quickly, and you may remember, you may not remember this, about, I don't know if it was 6 or 7 years ago to be exact, but I'm officiating a basketball game in Canastota, South Dakota, and I walk onto the court for the JV game, and I'm counting, and I'm like, man, I see 5 girls on the court, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And then the only other 2 people on this team I see are, I think 2 at most, maybe 3 dressed up. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, this is going to be interesting. And so tell us more about the start of this program, because it started for you 7 years ago, and you basically started the program from the ground up. 8 girls, I would assume 3/4 of them, maybe half of them were at least 7th and 8th graders. You needed to have JV team. You needed to work them into the system, try to build the program, try to get good, solid play out of them, even if it was a challenge the first few years. So tell us more about that. I mean, if you remember that first Canastota game, go ahead and tell us more about that. But tell us about that, everything.
Yeah, I remember that game and a lot of games early in my career. And, for me personally, it's been a fantastic experience. I mean, to get to be a part of a program where you really, like you said, kind of build it from the ground up and get a chance to see these kids grow. It's just been such an evolution of those kids as 7th and 8th graders playing at the varsity level for me, who were juniors and seniors last year and getting to be a part of a state championship. And so the story really began for me. I've been a Centerville guy my whole life. I was K-12 there, went to college, kept coaching there and came back. I just keep kind of landing there. They keep having me around, which has been great. And it started with an email from a grandmother. We had some girls that left the program. I was the assistant boys coach at the time. I was also assistant football at the time and had been there a couple of years coaching and had a little bit of experience, but never as a head coach. And I got an email from a grandma who had about 4 granddaughters in the program. And it was a very passionate email about, girls sports in Centerville and the status of those and, kind of getting these programs turned around. And she had the faith in me to be able to do that and asked if it was something I'd thought about. And honestly, before that email, I hadn't necessarily considered it. But that same day, I went and talked to our athletic director, and I inquired about it, and I was excited about being a head coach, and I had a passion for wanting to see those programs turn around and our girls' program start succeeding. And 7 years later, we won the state title. And so it's been a surreal experience. It's been a maturing experience, and it's really been a great one for me personally.
Yeah. I just remember the first, like I said, that Canastota game. I remember that very vividly because I think it was really weird for me to experience a coach who had a difficult time with their team. I'm gonna use that phrase, difficult time with their team, and their first reaction wasn't, I'm gonna yell at the officials as much as I could. The response was, you just need to make a better pass. We need to learn how to dribble better. We need to play better defense. Like I just constantly heard coaching, good advice, wisdom through all of that, and I'm sitting there like, this is not typical of a coach that has a team that is challenged at the moment. Like that's not what I see a lot of the times. I get my butt chewed. It seems like for, you see. I mean, I think there's a point though, where I did get one butt chewing from you, and I deserved it. It was like a tackle of a girl, and I just missed it. And that's the only time I think I saw you react in a way that I'm like, oh goodness, I missed something. Really, it's one of those things. And I think that's, a testament to you as a coach is like, you knew where you're at. I mean, I can assume nowadays you're probably fighting harder for your team because you're like, we're going to be in this, or good, we're a good team, but you're still coaching them the same way as you did back. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate the honesty. And I'll be honest, I don't remember that exact call. So you're off the hook in my book for that one anyway. But, I just think to me, we preach as coaches to our players that you got to control what you can control. Mm-hmm. And for me to be on the sidelines and trying to control officials and try and be in their ear and stuff like that, I just accepted a long time ago that that's not something I can control. Yeah. So if I'm going to, be able to practice what I preach to my athletes, I shouldn't be focused on that stuff anyway. Yeah. And ultimately, I just have an appreciation for what officials do. I've done it, mm-hmm. and it's not easy. And I think every coach should do it because I think if you haven't, you shouldn't, be a critic per se. But I just think you got to control what you can control. And I think as a coach, if you're poised and if you're focused on things that can actually tangibly help you win the game, I think your players follow suit. Mm-hmm. And so I've always tried to focus on that. And doesn't mean I'm perfect at it, not by a long stretch. But I work at it, and I do reflect on it. Yeah. Well, and I think if I remember correctly listening to the post-game interview after you guys had won the state tournament, you had talked about the different, whether it's team camps, tournament camps, whatever, your girls, they wanted to go to these things. They wanted to get better. I don't know if you talked about driving down to Omaha or Lincoln or something like that. What is that mentality from the team where it seemed like they wanted to go, they wanted to get better, and how does that kind of ripple down and continue to grow this team? Yeah, I've been very fortunate to have players that believe that your seasons are built in the off season, and they really are, because if you hit the season and you haven't worked on your jump shot or you haven't worked on your ball handling skills, like it probably isn't going to happen. I mean, there's just not enough time when the season hits. There's too many other things to do. But we have kids that are really super bought into that mentality. And last summer, we actually took a trip to Louisville. Okay. Got to meet Jeff Walls and his coaching staff. And we played great. I mean, we ended up going 5-1, which was great. I mean, we played really high-quality teams, Kentucky teams, Indiana teams, a couple AAU squads. But more so than just like the competitive level that we were able to play at, which was awesome, there was a lot of bonding. And just a lot of fun moments, going out and having supper together, going and doing fun things, hitting the water park. And really, I think your team needs that. I mean, at the end of the day, they're basketball players, but they're kids first. Yeah. And so you got to focus on those things in the off season. And actually, let's see, a couple of days from now on Monday, we're actually headed to the Wisconsin Dells for a team camp this summer. And it'll be a very similar one where we'll play, but we'll do a lot of fun things. We'll hit the water park. It'll be the first time I'm away from my little guy, so it's going to be, bittersweet for me. But for our team, it's important, and it's going to be a really good moment. So, I've just been really fortunate because I have players that buy into getting better. Mm-hmm. And that's ultimately why our program's turned around. Yeah, for sure. And I feel like maybe that's another thing that kind of prepares a team is you don't realize that you're with this team for 4 days, actually, during the state tournament. And, I mean, people can get on your nerves. You could have different situations like that. So even going to a camp down in Louisville or going to Wisconsin Dells, you get to experience your teammates in a way that
not a lot of people get to experience in the 3 or 4 day span. Do you think that helped them prepare for the state tournament and being together for 4 days, or do they have like a friendship that, it's not that big of a deal?
I think we're a small town. I think our kids are a fairly tight knit group.
Sure.
But I think those moments and ability to bond, though, just as a team, and kind of being together. Our philosophy as a team, our breakdown is always family, and I think our kids really believe that. I think they treat each other like family, whether that's good, whether that's bad. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you're going to have ups and downs. But I think when you share in those fun moments and that camaraderie, it makes a long season, as you said, just more endurable, and you would just enjoy being around each other. Because that's the thing about basketball season, and it as an official, it's a long stretch.
Yep.
I mean, you're November and hopefully to March, right? So, I mean, that's a long stretch that you get to be together, which is a really special thing. But you got to work on those relationships all the time.
Yep, for sure. And speaking of relationships, tell us a little bit more about yourself, your family. Obviously, we know about the newest addition to your family, but yeah, tell us about your family, some hobbies or anything else that, might be interesting to know about you.
Yeah, you bet. So my wife, Brittany, and I are going to be going on 3 years here being married, and actually met in Centerville. My wife is our second grade teacher, and we just welcomed our little guy, Harrison, into the world. And we actually live on a hobby farm together. And so we've got some Highlander cattle, we've got little miniature donkeys, we've got sheep, we've kind of got the whole works. So, if we're not in a gym, if we're not in school, we're outside a lot. We're with animals, and we just have a lot of passions that we share together, which is great. And just, me personally, my wife attends nearly every game. My mom and dad attend nearly every game. My father-in-law, my mother-in-law, just so many people in my family have been hugely supportive of this run. And just for us to all get to share in that this last season was really special because, as with officiating too, you take some time away from your family to do this thing. And basketball sometimes can kind of take your life over a little bit. And so to me, if I'm going to pour in all the time that I do, it really feels good when it's worth it because you have that success and you see that program built. And I just am so appreciative of my family for letting me do this thing because it's a passion of mine, it's a hobby of mine, and I love every minute of it.
Yeah, it's like you mentioned, it's a commitment. It's November to March, and I mean sometimes it's even I don't know about high school sports, I guess, but October to March sometimes for me. But you still have open gyms, you have things like that where kids can come in and you're probably there. And it's also in the summer. So it's like, it's really a commitment. It is, like you said, when they break down family, you're kind of right in there with them with family because you're with them. You could be with them 9 months out of the year. And it's a it's a wild ride to be a part of, whether that's officiating or coaching. But oh, sorry, were you going to say something else there?
No, I was just going to, that's part of the reason I have just such a profound respect for coaches and for officials and teachers and admin, and just because the time you spend with those kids, the amount of time is you truly can have an impact. I mean, I know people say that, but you really can. Mm-hmm. And I found that out in my career. I've been lucky enough to see that. And I've had a lot of great former coaches, former teachers and things that you really can have an impact on people. So it is special and we're lucky to get to do it.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, a smaller town, it's probably a little bit easier to be more impactful. Not to say it's more difficult in a bigger situation, but sometimes you get to see those girls from 8th grade to senior, where some of these coaches get to see them. If they're a stud, you might get them freshman, sophomore year, but a lot of times junior, senior, and you don't get that as big of a interaction with those players. But anyway, you talked about being an assistant coach for football. You talked about being an assistant coach for the boys' side over there, and that's somewhat how you got started and involved. Is there a backstory even further back? Like, how did you get involved and how did you get started into coaching? Was that something you were like, man, I really want to go into coaching once I graduate? Was even maybe back further, like, was I going to go into teaching? Tell us a little bit more about the way back of that.
Yeah, so really for me, it started with a sports injury when I was in high school. So 2 games left in the football season my senior year, I tore my ACL. Had to have a major ACL and meniscal reconstruction. So football was done for the year. Basketball, I came back the last few games, but really it wasn't the same, and it was a tough experience. But really, that led me to coaching because it drove me nuts. You're doing your rehab, you're standing at practice. I mean, you're there, but it just drives you crazy when you're an athlete that's used to competing and being involved. And so, actually, my senior year, I started kind of helping our junior high coach in basketball and started coaching a little bit. And that turned into coaching baseball in the summer. It turned into Pat Cease, who was our head football coach at the time, now teaches and coaches at Lennox, asking me to help out with the football program. And really, it was that injury for me that led me to wanting to still be involved and do more that kind of led me to coaching, and I fell in love with it. And I just don't think that passion for the sport, the passion for being a part of something bigger than myself, it's just never been able to escape me, and I don't think it ever will. But that's kind of where it started for me, and I've been coaching ever since.
Yeah, and you mentioned you said Coach C is there. Were there a few other coaches that kind of had that influence on you? Was there someone in the college that you attended that was like, hey, here's I'd like to mentor you a little bit more? Tell us more about those influences on you and into your coaching.
Yeah, for me, it was my high school coaches. It was Pat Cease, who coached me in football. He was our assistant boys basketball as well. It was Corey Muller, who was my head boys basketball coach and is currently our boys basketball coach now again in Centerville. Those guys had a profound impact on me. They were just constant, steady forces that you spent a lot of time with. They just had high character. They cared about you. They were invested in your future. And I just remember seeing that impact and wanting to have an impact like that in whatever career that I chose. And a lot of coaches now have really changed my coaching philosophy and just the way that I overall work on building a program. And a big one of those is Coach Lynn Frederick, who spent his career at Brookings and is now a coach for the Sanford Pentagon. Coach Fred has been huge. He's been huge for our program. He's come and done workouts with our kids. He's been a mentor of mine and really had a big impact on my career. And so, those coaches and those influences, there's some that are early on, but that never really goes away. And so guys like Coach Frederick, guys like Brad Poppy down at Avon, that's had tons of success and is a great coach, even better human being. Those guys are just an inspiration to me and continue to be.
Yeah, and I've been hearing a lot about, just the camaraderie in the coaching realm. Even I heard about, my goodness, it's going to space me, but down in Platte Geddes, my goodness. Anyway, coach down there, he's the person that he would basically just share everything but the playbook with me. So just thinking through every situation, everything they might do in a certain situation, and just everything but the playbook. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. And it might not be completely like that everywhere. But Coach Cutler, my goodness, I was going to go insane if I forgot that. But anyway, so you talked about philosophies, like you took philosophies from some coaches that you had, and which sort of philosophies do you see kind of being taken from those coaches, but also maybe you're like, I don't necessarily like that philosophy, and I think it would, and for my coaching style, this philosophy would fit better. What philosophy maybe did you do the inverse of because you thought like this is going to be better for our team in our program?
Sure. I think that you take all your experiences of coaches and coaches you've observed, whether it was, directly or indirectly. It doesn't have to be just your coaches, just people you're watching and, you're always evaluating and trying to learn. And I think you somewhat kind of have a blend of all of that. But I think to me, whether it's a coaching clinic, whether it's conversations with coaches, ultimately you have to do what fits you because just like your players, if you're doing something that you're not bought into and you're not going to be all in, it's probably not going to be successful. And so we all do that, right? I mean, we pick up things, we think, oh man, that's going to be really good. But you know what? If it's not in my heart and it's not in my style and it doesn't fit me, I'm probably not going to deliver that very well to the players. And they're going to see right through that because kids are smart.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing you have to remember there. But, my overall philosophy is that I touched on this earlier, like it's kids first. And I think if you remember that you're dealing with kids, you're dealing with young adults that are trying to grow and mature and find their own way in life. I think that it gives you a little bit of grace, which I think you got to have as a coach. I think it gives you some patience, which you definitely need as a coach. And I just think overall it keeps you focused on trying to build relationships with your players. I mean, the X's and O's and the skills and all of that are really important. But if you don't build the relationship, I don't know that any of that's really worth it, just to be honest. And, one of the other things I've always believed in is like, I think kids crave discipline and structure. I think that they need that. And I played for coaches that had a lot of discipline and structure. But I think there's a way you can handle that. And I know John Wooden always uses the quote that you shout praise and whisper criticism. And I think that's really important. I think that quote really is all about respect. Mm-hmm. And I think when you show your players respect by, maybe taking them aside and giving good, honest, constructive criticism, but not necessarily doing it publicly, I think you gain a lot of respect from your players. And then for me, I'm an active guy. I'm a vocal guy. I mean, you touched on that earlier. I'm sure you have heard some things from me. And I just think you got to show your passion. I think your kids feed off your passion. And so I try and do that. You got to have a sense of calm, but you got to have passion. Because to me, if you take the passion and the intensity out of the game, then it's probably not worth doing. You just, golf or do something else. So.
No, for sure. I did have a coach on here that said I plead insanity for 2 minutes in each game. And so, just the passion behind that, I can agree. And you have to have that, or else you just seem like another person out there just trying to get a paycheck or just trying to fill a void that a team needs. And the players know that, and they don't want to put in the effort. And they know that you're not there to have that relationship like you had mentioned. And along with those relationships, I'm pretty sure that there's some fun stories or memorable experiences that you have as being a coach. So tell us about maybe a fun story that you have during this time, whether that's with players, with other coaches, or maybe even just with your family.
Yeah. I'm going to start with a story that really happened the year we kind of turned things around. So the first year I coached, we won one game at the varsity level. We won some JV games. We were on a hybrid schedule. I think the next year we maybe won 5, and I think we won 8 and then 9, and I might be a little off on that. But slowly we got better. And really where our program is right now is a testament to our former players, because like the kids that come into this program now, we're pretty honest with them. Like, you're coming into a good deal. I mean, you're coming into a program that suffered the losses, suffered the blowouts, the tough years to help turn this thing around for you. And so I try and never lose sight of that because I was there. And I don't think our current players should necessarily lose sight of that either, because I think it's important to understand where the program came from. But the story I want to tell is about a young lady who, and if she hears this, she'll know I'm talking about her. I don't necessarily have to use her name, but she played for me since she was an 8th grader. And she was the most selfless player that I've ever coached. Her role wasn't always luxurious. Mm-hmm. She played for me in the hard times, but she got to experience the good times when we made the SODAC 16 her senior season. Hmm. But I just remember, I want to say it was maybe 2 or 3 games into that year. We were playing up in Estline. We were playing Estline Hendricks, and we were playing pretty well. And this is when our young players had kind of matured into, at least freshmen and sophomores. So they're still young players, but that's a different level of young than 7th and 8th graders. Yep. And I remember after the game, and it was a nice win. I don't remember what it was, but it was a solid win. We played well. And I remember looking at her, and she was a senior, and she looked at the rest of the girls in the locker room, and she just smiled and said, "Girls, isn't this fun?" And I mean, you'd have to be there to really understand what that felt like. But this was a kid that had endured 30 to 40 point blowouts for 2 or 3 years as a player, and got to see this thing come full circle. Didn't get to be a player at the state tournament, but got to watch her sisters play and was there in the crowd. That was just a special moment for me. And that was just kind of a full circle, kind of the epitome of our program. And it just goes back to the credit that I give those players that endured the tough times in Centerville. Because if they hadn't done that, we wouldn't be where we're at now, and we wouldn't be state champions without those kids. So that's a story I wanted to share. But another story would just be from this past season. Our girls went out to Rapid City, and they just had so much fun. I mean, I don't know if you've heard any of the stories from out there, but I mean, they were singing in the stands when the arena was playing music before games. They were loose. They were relaxed, which if I didn't know the group better as a coach, it might have made me nervous.
Sure.
But I knew that group plays their best when they're relaxed and they're not stressed and they're not putting too much pressure on themselves because, that's one thing I think, especially female athletes, they put a lot of pressure on themselves. And it's part of why I don't think you always have to be very hard on them because they're already pretty hard on themselves. But they were so relaxed. And so when the state tournament was all done, we had won the state title. It was such a special thing. We get back to the hotel where all the teams are staying. A lot of our fans were. And we're welcomed into the doors after winning the title by mostly our fans, which was awesome. But also, I think nearly every single other team that was involved in that state tournament was there lining that tunnel and congratulating our kids. And basically, it turned into like an 8-team high school girl dance party in the lobby. I'm pretty sure the managers at some point kind of had to shut it down. But what a special deal. Like, that was just the epitome of kids being losing with grace, playing with grace, and every one of those teams got to experience the joy of success in the state tournament. I was super proud of our kids for helping those kids be involved. Yeah. It was special.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I tell people when people want to like get rid of the consolation bracket or get rid of those games. I say I would have paid anything to go to the state tournament to lose 3 games just to experience that. It's something you can't take away from anybody, and it's unfortunate that people want to. And yeah, like you said, that at the end, all of the girls dancing together, they're celebrating their year. They made it to the state tournament. Even if some lost 3 straight, I'm pretty sure they were still excited to be at that place.
Absolutely. Every one of those teams got to share in that, and there was a lot of fun, and it was just a cool moment. And to your point, like with the consolation stuff, I think, honestly, I mean, obviously winning the state title is great. However, the team that wins that consolation championship, that takes a lot of grit, and that to me is one of the most special games of the tournament because when you lose day one, it's tough, right? Yep. Because you understand that ultimate trophy isn't there anymore. But to come back from that and rattle off 2 wins in a row, that takes a lot of guts and a lot of grit. And that was the Wall Eagles this year, and I give them a lot of credit. That's a big win after losing on the first day.
Yep. Agreed, 100%. And us officials, we like we like to officiate those games as well because we want to show that we worked hard throughout the season, and there's still games for us also. So I'm just going to plug that as well. So hopefully South Dakota never gets rid of those consolation games because we enjoy officiating basketball just as much as the kids like playing and the coaches like coaching. So along with that, I'm talking about officials. We love rules. We like to learn the rules, call the rules. Tell us about a rule that, 2-part question. Tell us about a rule that you were glad was added to the game in your 7 years or even, 9, 10, however many you've been, as well as maybe one that you don't like very much or wish would be modified slightly.
Sure. Yeah, I think you could go a lot of directions with that. And I think it's impressive, when you look at the officials, like my job as a coach, I feel like I know the rules decent. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm an expert because I don't think I am. I think it's hugely impressive when officials just kind of know their stuff. Yeah. And you can tell, like there's some guys and gals that when they officiate you're like, you know what, they are students of the game. As you touched on, they are just as passionate about it as coaches and players. And I love that. I mean, that to me is just the ultimate, just immediate sign of respect is when you see an official that's just passionate. As far as rules, I love the shot clock. I really do. I think when the shot clock was added in South Dakota, I think it changed the game. I think it makes the end of games more interesting as a fan. I love the end of game situations. We do end of game situations at least 3 times a week, sometimes every day if I can get my way and my assistants will let me. I love that. I love the X's and O's and seeing your players execute those situations and stuff. I think that's just such a cerebral thing for kids. I think it's a special growing and maturing moment for them. So I love the shot clock. I think that the addition of the shot clock has made the game just, I hate to say more exciting, but I think that is important. I do think it does make it more exciting. I don't necessarily need to see a team run a stall offense for 4 minutes to end the game like I used to see in the past. I just, me personally, I don't need to see that. I would rather see, how are you going to handle having 45 seconds left and you're up 2 or you're down 2? Are you going to foul? Are you going to play it out? I love that. So I think the addition of the shot clock's been huge, and I would love to see that continue, and I think it will. I think most people that I talk to, at least, are hugely in favor of that. As far as a rule, I don't know that there's a rule that I can say like, oh, we should just eliminate that or we should change that. I think a current one that I'm going to touch on that will be relevant for people is the eliminating the 1-and-1 and changing foul rules with the bonus. I don't think it was bad, and I think, to my understanding, there was a degree of maybe eliminating some of the contact on some of the free throws and the box outs and things like that. And I could be wrong. Maybe there was more to it than that. And I think that is true. But I think what's interesting about the rule is when you reset the fouls, and this is just my opinion, when you reset the fouls and you go into the fourth quarter of a close game, and maybe you're down 3 with like 2 minutes to go, and you're only sitting at 0 or 1 team fouls, and it takes 5 to get into the bonus. I wonder sometimes, does that actually create more of an aggressive mentality, more of a physicality? So have we removed physicality with that rule from one area? Maybe. But I wonder if it adds physicality to other situations and has changed the game a little bit that way.
Yeah, and I think that's something, a good point to be brought up, and even kind of something for us officials to be aware of is, hey, are we adjudicating this intentional foul like we should be doing? Because if it's going to get intense, if we're trying to eliminate the hard play in the free throw game and the box out situations, and then we're allowing a harder play because we're scrambling to grab a player or get a foul or hit the player on the arm, so it kind of puts that back onto us to be accountable to that call. And so I'm glad you brought that up. I have some new rules for this upcoming year, some things that are changing. One that I've kind of been asking both officials and coaches is about the blood rule, where you'll have 20 seconds to kind of alleviate that blood on the uniform. And if you could do it in that 20 seconds, the player can stay in the game. They don't have to leave the game. What's your thoughts on that blood rule?
Well, I'm lucky to have a good assistant coach that's always got a Tide fan. She's a mom, so she's always got the whole works. So I don't handle those situations very often, so maybe I'm not the best to speak on it. But no, I think, to me, like, I don't want to see a player miss time in the game because of a situation like that.
Yeah.
I think that the rules should always allow players, if they can do so safely, to be able to remain in the game, because that's the worst, right? I mean, all of a sudden you get to a late game situation, players got some blood or something, they got to come out, you got to take them out of the game. That's a pivotal moment that honestly could change the outcome of a game. But more importantly, just flat out stinks for that kid that has to miss it. Well, so I think any rule where they're allowed to, be able to still come back in the game, to me, is better.
And you bring up an interesting point there, because along with that, they also just changed a rule to say if we as officials say, hey, you need to get out here, it doesn't matter. Now that player's got to leave. So I'm thinking back to 2 years ago, I was out in Rapid. We had, if you remember, Lincoln Keenholz. He went up for a layup and just got undercut on the play. Well, we said, hey, coaches, you got to get out here. Like, he's on the ground. He's injured. Well, now you're stuck. Like, you either call that timeout or you sub him out and have someone else shoot free throws. And that's a tough one right there, because he might not even get back into the game pending certain situations. So I think it's kind of weird. You go from one extreme of like, hey, we're going to let people now stay with blood as long as it gets resolved. But now we're going to remove them if the coach is even like, if the official goes, hey, you come here, that player's got to leave.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that those two rules, in a sense, kind of conflict themselves a little bit. I think for me, as far as that stuff goes, if the officials believe that there's a safety issue or that a player should come out of the game, I like that they have the ability to do that. Because you know what? You guys and gals at the end of the day are the first line of defense for our players, because you're generally right on top of it. you're right in the mix of it, and you are going to have a true assessment of the angle of whether those players, sustained an injury they should come out for, or maybe there's some signs and symptoms of things that they just shouldn't be in the game. I like that.
Sure.
As a coach, do you love that when it means that maybe your star player or something? And we're talking about Lincoln Keynoles, we're talking about a star player right there. But do you love that? No. But at the end of the day, any rule that enhances player safety, I think, is worthwhile. The blood stuff, to me, if it can be handled quickly, it's not anything severe, let's get them back in there.
Yep.
That's my thing.
For sure. I'm not going to skip over this because I was about to skip over this question. I'm like, I got to do this. This is part of the podcast. It's part of the interview process. So give me a memorable interaction with an official that you had. I completely skipped over this one. And I'm like, shoot, we got to go back to this. This is kind of the part of the podcast that is going to be maybe some good content here. So yeah, a memorable interaction with an official. It can be a good one. Hopefully it's not too bad if it is a bad one, but yeah, floor is yours there.
Yeah, I'll share a couple, and I'm going to share a good. I'm going to share a bad that turned good because I think it's I think it's perfect for this podcast. To be honest with you, if you agree with me. But the first one, I just remember being a young coach, and I remember, as you talked about, times being tough and it being difficult. And I'm gonna name drop this one because I don't think he'll mind, and I think this is a great interaction. But an official you probably know. By the name of Todd Koss. Do you know Todd?
Yep.
He's a fantastic guy. He's officiated me many times. And he is one of the most just honest, approachable, caring officials that I've ever had the experience with. But I just remember being a young coach. We were in a game where we were losing bad. It was difficult. And I remember him coming up to me after the game and basically just saying like, hey, I appreciate how you coach. I appreciate your style and how you talk to your kids and things like that. And I just really hope you stick with it. And sometimes immediately after those tough losses, to hear that from Todd and just to get a little encouragement from him, I'll never forget that. And I am forever grateful for just our interactions and how he's treated me my entire career, just as a truly caring human being. The other story that I'll share, and again, I think it really fits this podcast, is it is a technical foul that I received last year. And I deserved it. I deserved every minute of it. Now, what happened is one of my players tried to draw a charge. There had been a lot of contact on the perimeter all game long, and I felt that their guard pretty blatantly fully extended and basically just drove our girl to the ground. I mean, just shoved her to the ground. And this was a pretty small guard in there, a young kid that plays for us. And in my mind, it was no doubt 100% offensive foul. Like, there's no way to see it any other way. So, I was a little bit hot about it. I wanted to talk to him about it. I didn't do it in the right way because I kind of got a little bit hot about it and it got a little heated. One thing I've always prided myself, and I can honestly say, is I've never sworn at an official. I never swear around kids. I don't think you need to. But I said some things that I didn't need to say. But I was trying to defend my player. I was trying to make a point. And I just really couldn't see that not being called. And so it just really bothered me. He gave me a technical, rightfully so. I was out of my coaching box. I was loud. I deserved it 100%. And it, I think I've only gotten 2 technicals. So I'm not somebody that gets them often. It's not like I'm getting them every other game. But after the game was over, he had the humbleness and the courage and the professionalism to review the tape and actually sent me an email and apologized and said that he did feel it was an offensive foul that he missed, and he didn't feel he should have given me a technical foul for it. And I'm here to tell you that official earned my respect in a huge, huge way in how humble he was and the professionalism in which he handled that situation. And I just think that's what it's all about. Like, we're all competitive. We're all passionate. We all, sometimes, just the passion of the game gets the best of us. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, we're all there for the kids. Nobody's truly going in there biased. Everybody wants what's best for the kids and the overall experience. He missed a call. I didn't handle it well. but we both apologized. We both found common ground. And to me, that's what it's all about. And I just have huge respect for him doing that.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's good to hear. Todd is an awesome guy. I don't know how close of a friend he is, but we chat a lot. We work games a lot. We've worked some pretty hotly contested SD16 games, and so I know him to be, like you said, very honest guy, very straightforward, very good official, and so it doesn't surprise me that that's the kind of story I hear from you about him. He's just all around great guy, like you said. But we talked about like a guy like Todd Koss, who's been in it for a while, who's really earned the respect of people and coaches, players, you name it. But there are some officials that are new to the game. They're just getting into it, maybe a couple years in, and so just for the last question here, tell us, maybe some advice you'd give to those newer officials. And I don't mean this in a disrespecting way, but maybe you're like, hey, I understand the feeling. Like I was in the muck, I was in the mire for the first 3 years, so I can understand that feeling. But like, what's some good advice for those newer officials that are working their way in and aren't really sure? They're kind of on the fence, like, should I keep doing or should I not?
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, first of all, I hope any young officials that are listening to your podcast, and I appreciate you doing this podcast because we need more people like you that are putting a positive light on, relationships between coaches and officials. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we're just trying to give kids in South Dakota the best experience they can in high school athletics. And so we need more of this. But my advice for young officials is, first of all, keep with it because we need you. And, take some criticism. I think there's some coaches that have done it for a long time that, sometimes at the end of the day, even as a young coach, I need to hear it from them. I'm sure as a young official, sometimes it's okay to hear that from them too. And I think sometimes you just got to listen and you got to take that for what it is, because that's how we learn, right? And we're not perfect, and we all understand that. But I think my biggest piece of advice for young officials is be willing to communicate. When it comes to coach to coach, coach to player, coach to parent, player to coach, any relationship in just life, it's not even basketball, be willing to communicate. Because I think if you're honest, if you share your perspective, and you have an open line of communication with the coach, generally, I don't think things get out of hand. And I don't think that you get to those big moments that nobody really wants to see in the game, right? Are you going to have some small disagreements? Absolutely. That's part of it. Mm-hmm. That's part of life. But just keep an open line of communication, because I think that's a sign of respect for coaches. I think it's a sign of respect for officials. And at the end of the day, we're all there working together to give kids a great experience. Yeah,
and I think the big part of communication also is just to say what you saw. Because if you ask the question, because I know as a younger official, I was sitting there like, I just need to be in this spot. I need to see the play. I need to make the call. I can't talk to this coach. Like that's sort of the thing where your brain just starts going 1,000 miles an hour. But once you make that call, what you saw is what you saw. And so as to a coach, you just got to say, this is what I saw. And you could argue with it if you want to, but that's what I saw, or that's what they saw. And so I think that's a huge part of communication is don't say, I think, because we're going to run down some rabbit trails you don't want to. If you see something, call it, say, I saw it this way. And I don't think you would object to that. You might disagree, but I don't think you're going to object to someone saying that.
No, I wouldn't object to that at all. And be confident. You're there for a reason. All the officials are passing the rules test. They're studying the game. They're there for a reason. So be confident in calls, and I see that with you. I see you as an official that's confident. You study the game and you have confidence in your calls. And even from a crowd perspective, like when officials are confident and make their calls, what are you going to say? That's what they saw. And I've had a lot of veteran officials, and I love this, that will just flat out say, like, you know what, coach, you might have had a better angle than me, and I might have missed that.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, when you're honest, what's anybody going to say about that? Yep. I have huge respect for that. It's no different for me with my players. If we're trying to put on a facade or act like we never make mistakes, then we're just being dishonest at that point. So I think officials being honest, I love that.
Yep. Yeah, I try to be as honest as possible. I had one I had one coach tell me one time, I made a call and I said exactly what I saw happened as I'm reporting it to the table. I didn't say hit, I didn't say push, I didn't say, whatever else. I said exactly what I saw and I used the appropriate mechanic. And he looks at me and he goes, Andrew, I hate you so much because you say exactly what it is. I can't argue with that. And so, it's I don't know if he said hate. I think he said I can't argue with that because you said exactly. But you could just see it. He's like, "Oh, I'm just so frustrated because I can't argue with what you just said because you said exactly verbatim what you saw." And I think that's a good thing. And just communication, because also to the table, you're communicating to the table, but you're also communicating to the two coaches when you make that call at the table. And so
absolutely.
And so if I say exactly what I saw to the table and I use the appropriate signal, the coaches are going to be like, wait, okay, I didn't see that, but okay, that's got to be the right call. It almost makes you question, did I see what I actually saw or not? And so, but
absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, any last words for Tornado Nation down there in Centerville?
I tell you what, as far as Tornado Nation, it's just really been fun. And I'm just humbled to constantly be able to give back to a place that's given a lot to me. I'm blessed with great coaching staff. I'm blessed with great players. I'm blessed with a great community. I'm blessed with a great family, my wife and son. I mean, for us to get to do this deal, it's just special. And I think doing stuff like this reminds you of that when you get to talk about it. So I appreciate you letting me ramble on tonight about something that I love doing. And I just want to thank you, because I think podcasts like this, I think the more as coaches, officials, parents, players, the more we just communicate and build relationships with each other, the more that this great sport of basketball in South Dakota, which I think has come a long ways, by the way, is just going to continue to excel. And I just think we're going to do great things in this state, and it's because of conversations like this.
Yeah, that's why I want to do this, and I don't care how far this goes, what happens with it. I just want people to see they're like, I've got Coach Tornberg tonight. What is he like? And they can just flip on the YouTube, even as they're driving to the game, and be like, oh, this guy seems pretty reasonable. He did yell one time. Okay, so he might get a little mad if a play doesn't go exactly the right way, but for the most part, he's even keel. And I just hope that becomes a reality. Is people like, okay, let's see Coach Tornberg as he is, and not kind of put this facade of what someone, or not necessarily a facade, but projection onto him of what someone else had experienced in the past. And so, I truly appreciate you taking the time to do this. Like you mentioned, new child, it is time away from them and your wife. And so, I appreciate your time this evening, and thank you very much, everybody. This has been Coach Tucker Tornberg from Centerville High School for the girls basketball team. I am Andrew Gross. This is the Irenic Ref podcast, and I hope to see you next time.